Alright, we're rolling. It's the Pedantic Skeptic, and today I am going to be responding to a video by a channel called Fight for Truth, also called Fight for Truth Media. It is a right-wing YouTube channel with about 277k subbies and 315 videos. A lot of their content looks like it's some right-wing conspiracy stuff. There's something about Taylor Swift selling her soul, Tucker Carlson being corrupted, Barbie being demonic, just all sorts of ridiculousness. And so today I'm going to look at this alleged horrifying new law that targets Christians, because this is something that, if it's true, if there's truly something legally targeting a religious group in the United States, that's a serious problem. So let's see if this actually is what I think it is. Yeah.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
No, I don't want that.
Hey guys, Colin here, and welcome back to Fight for Truth,
Hi, what's up?
the channel where we bring you Christian commentary about the things that matter. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a horrifying new set of laws in California that, if passed, will inevitably target Christians.
Uh-oh. So, I'm a big proponent of the First Amendment, and I'm a big believer in religious freedom. If you want to believe something stupid, weird, whatever, and you're not harming other people with it, it's your right to be stupid. It is your right to hold to outdated, perhaps even harmful ideologies, if you so choose. Now, I don't believe for a second that California is actually passing laws that are going to actually adversely harm people of the Christian religion. But let's just see.
The first thing we need to recognize here is that California has become an increasingly more difficult state to live in
Increasingly more difficult. You know how to be succinct.
for people with common sense and, more specifically, people with Christian values.
Those things don't necessarily line up. So, first of all, given how many denominations of Christianity there are, I don't know if we can pin down Christian values. Second of all, a lot of things that Christians say are Christian values are actually just commonly held ideas that most people, regardless of their religious faith, hold to. Such as charity, such as, peace.
The people who run the state are frequently just as immoral as they are self-absorbed.
Do you have evidence of this?
For some good case studies, just take a look at Gavin Newsom, the state's governor, and Nancy Pelosi, who's a longtime congresswoman there. Both are high-profile Californian politicians, and both are ethically bankrupt, to say the very least.
How so?
But now, ladies and gentlemen, the progressives in California have taken their hatred of biblical values to the next level. This time, they have
One sec. Sorry, my pet sitter's just updating me on something. I'm almost done with my Idaho stuff, and then I'm gonna spend a couple days in Colorado again before I go to New Mexico, but that's a different matter.
decided to propose two new laws that will actively persecute biblical Christians if they are passed.
Okay, well, let's see what they are.
And by the way, stick around to the end if you want to see how much these insane laws are going to cost Christians in California who pay their taxes. I won't keep you in suspense, so let me tell you what these laws are. Law number 1 is proposed legislation AB 957. And this law governs which parent will get the child in the event of a custody battle between two former spouses.
Okay, so generally what happens is when a court, because when I was a kid, my parents got divorced and they had to decide who would get full custody. With my particular case, it was actually very easy because my father didn't really want to fight for custody, so they just automatically give it to my mother. Whether that was for the better is a different matter, but that's just what happened. And so basically, we went ahead and the court looks at which parent is better for the child's well-being.
But here's the kicker. This law makes gender affirmation a deciding factor in cases like this.
Okay, so first of all, how does that target Christians? But second of all, why is that a bad thing? Why is making sure... So here's the thing. Let's say I have a child with somebody. Never gonna happen. I'm proud to be child-free. But let's say I have a child with someone. It's funny because a lot of people I went to high school and college with are having kids now. I'm in my late 20s. And I guess I'm at the age where that's a normal, common thing. And it's a little bit of a shock, actually. But let's suppose I'm one of these crazy woke people, and I don't believe these people really exist all that much. Let's say I'm a crazy woke person who's really dead set on having a daughter, and I end up with a biological male child, and I have a problem with that. And, this is hypothetical. I obviously wouldn't have a problem with how my child identified, but let's just suppose I was forcing a cis boy child to present feminine, identify as a female, as a girl. Would that, in that case, be a problem, be a detriment to that child's mental health and well-being, and be grounds for not granting me custody of that child? If that is the case, then why is it any different if that child identifies as trans?
In other words, if you are a biblical Christian and you don't believe
What's the difference between a biblical Christian and a non-biblical Christian?
that your child should be allowed to transition into the opposite gender, there's a good chance that your child will be taken away from you.
Define taken away. Just because you don't have full custody of the child doesn't mean you don't have access to the child. Whether that's good or bad is up for debate, but this is not specific to Christians. You can be transphobic without being a Christian. I don't know if this guy understands that.
Just let that sink in. Perhaps some of you don't believe me. Here's what the law says verbatim. In custody disputes,
Let's read it on our own. Existing law governs the determination of child custody and visitation in contested proceedings and requires the court, for purposes of deciding custody, to determine the best interest of the child. That makes perfect sense. Because this is a vulnerable person who needs to be looked after. Okay. Good. My roaches are doing well. The child has to come first. And you need a holistic view of that child's condition to make a proper determination about how that child should be taken care of. The health, safety, and welfare of the child. The bill, for purposes of this provision, would include a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity as part of the health, safety, and welfare of the child. Now, I don't see why that's a bad thing.
the court will consider, quote, a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity as part of the health, safety, and welfare of the child.
Yes. Now, one of the things you don't understand about gender affirmation is that, A, children aren't being operated on, but B, gender affirmation also includes, the acceptance that maybe the child will change their mind. Because sometimes it happens. Gender affirmation is basically just not really caring what gender your child is. Okay? And I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean that by is you don't treat your child any differently for the gender that they are.
End quote. So get this. Not only are they suggesting that the affirmation of your child's gender confusion is important,
It's not confusion.
no, they are saying that it's just as important as things like caring for your child's health and safety.
Okay, part of caring for their health and safety is affirming their gender.
So if you are a terrible person who hates your children and wants them to be unhealthy and unsafe, according to this law, that's pretty much just as bad as disagreeing with their gender identity.
Well, here's the thing. There would be all of these things looked at by the courts. And what you don't understand is that the moment you contest somebody's custody of a child, everybody gets looked at. Okay? How it works is, if they determine that neither parent is fit to have custody of the child, that child goes to a third party. So it's not going to be this false dichotomy of either parent A or parent B gets the child. It's going to be parent A or parent B, or someone else who is more responsible, perhaps.
Think about how insane that statement is. And why on earth should any government have the right to take custody of your child away from you on the basis of this factor?
Because we have an understanding today, based on current science and psychology, that invalidating somebody's gender identity is detrimental to their well-being. That's why.
This is effectively forcing Christian parents to choose between their children and their faith.
I know very devout Christians with trans children who were just fine with allowing their children to live the gender they identify with. I don't see why those two things are mutually exclusive. You can be a devout Christian while still believing that children are capable of identifying as trans. And again, this isn't necessary. First of all, there's nothing in the wording about Christianity. There's nothing targeting any group. Second, the issue is a little bit more complicated than just, your kid wakes up, your daughter Susie wakes up one day and decides she wants to be Bob, and then tomorrow you have her getting, breast removal and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not how this works.
And if you disagree with modern gender identity, you are someone who does not care about the health and safety of your child.
If you are somebody with a child and you disagree with it, and there is a possibility the child is trans, then yes, you are showing a disregard for that child's well-being. It's as simple as that.
Anymore. You might as well be actively harming them.
You are actively harming them by denying their gender identity.
That's how this law will view you as a Christian parent. So hear me out.
Again, it's not all about Christian parents.
Guys, let's just think through some of the implications of this law. First, this means that if you have a spouse who is divorcing you on account of you disagree with transgender ideology and whether or not your kid can be trans, that parent not only gets to divorce you, but they also get to keep the child.
Okay, so first of all, he says it like it's a bad thing. Second of all, I would think that people who are going to get married and have children would already have a grasp. Just hear me out here. And I don't want to sound like a sarcastic asshole by saying this, but if you marry somebody and have a child with them without first knowing where they stand on this particular issue, that's a you problem. Don't make that the child's problem, and don't make that the person you're divorcing's problem. Okay? That's a you problem. This is something that you should have figured out way before you got to this point. I don't know why that's so hard for people.
And as if that wasn't bad enough, now that parent has all the incentive in the world to encourage your son or daughter to continue being transgender.
Now, the way you say encourage makes it seem like you're implying that the parent is pushing the child into something that they may not want to be doing. If the parent is simply standing there allowing their child to explore an aspect of themselves without influencing them one way or the other, are they really doing any harm?
What could possibly go wrong here, I wonder? Second, notice that there is a slippery slope just around the corner here. That's always how it starts out, right? It starts out with just custody battles. In fact, more specifically, just custody battles where the child identifies as a different gender than they are biologically. So these are pretty rare cases, right? We're not...
Indeed they are. Now, again, you would be outraged if a parent was forcing their child to be trans. And, I would be outraged too, because I don't think people should be forced to live a gender they don't identify as. One of the things that you have to realize is that in liberal philosophy, it goes both ways, like a lot of us liberals, but that's a different matter. If I am to hold consistently the value that people should be able to live their truth and their gender identity, then I will make sure that not only are trans people not forced to be cis, but cis people are not forced to be trans. This weird woke conspiracy that everyone on the left is trying to, gender bend everyone they can. That's not how this is happening. One of the things that you have to realize is that the proportion of trans people in the population hasn't really changed that much. Now, I've heard arguments that there are pollutants that are causing hormone disruptions, yada yada. I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that yet, but if that's the case, we need to address it, but that doesn't invalidate or, kind of make nullify the identities of the people who have already been born and who already exist.
We're not expecting a lot of them. Well, sure, that's probably true, but why should we think that it would stop with just these cases? You see, once the law has been established here, they now have precedent to change the law anywhere else it suits them.
Okay, but here's the thing. Laws are always being changed. There's always going to be something new coming out. Okay? So one example. So there's a clause in the Constitution, I believe it is, where Congress does what is necessary and proper to ensure, safety, civility, blah, blah, blah. Now, one of the things that's had to happen in the past 25 years is, with the advent of smartphones and texting and this and that, there are laws now, I know Massachusetts passed a hands-free law really early on in this, where, you can't be holding your phone while you're driving, okay? Now, 50 years ago, this was never something that had to be considered, because smartphones didn't exist 50 years ago. Hell, smartphones barely existed 20 years ago. When I was, in kindergarten, first grade, it was really just those stupid Nokia flip phones, with a tiny little screen, and, in order to type anything, you had to, hit the same number, 4 times to get the right letter, and then you had to wait for it to stop blinking before you could type the next thing, and it was just this whole process. And so, because we've gotten new technologies developed, new laws have to be made, because we're seeing, oh, you know what, it's not a good idea for somebody to be driving 2 tons of metal down a road at 30 miles an hour while not paying full attention to what's in front of them, okay? Because look, I don't have this issue anymore, but when I was first learning how to drive, I had so many close calls where I almost ran into somebody just because I was changing the fucking radio. Now, imagine if instead of a little dial on the dashboard, I'm looking at a fucking cell phone.
Suppose a parent has a child who identifies as transgender, and they want that child to attend church so that they can hear the gospel and be taught the word of God, and be corrected where necessary. It used to be the case that the parent gets to decide which religious ideals their child will be taught.
Now, personally, I think there should be some limitations as to how young you're allowed to indoctrinate children, this and that. I think that there should also be a requirement for children to learn at least about other religions and what they believe. But as far as what religion you call yourself and your family, that should be left up to you. Up to a certain point. I think once the child gets old enough, they should be allowed to say, I'm out of this. But, that's another matter.
But not anymore, because you see, that parent is not just disagreeing with their child's worldview. No, they are jeopardizing the health and safety and well-being of that child.
Yes, this is backed up by medical science.
And therefore, it is perfectly reasonable, given the definitions established by this law, that Child Protective Services, for example, would be able to take the child away and bring them to a new home with different parents who support the LGBT worldview.
The LGBT is not a worldview, it's a community.
This is what's at stake here. What about adoption? Suppose a Christian couple wants to adopt a baby. If they do, a government official is going to come into their house and judge whether or not they are fit to bring a child into their home.
Guess what? That's going to happen regardless of the religion of those parents. Do you think that any group in the United States gets just a free pass? We're just going to give you a baby, no questions asked, sort of thing? I mean, look, the system in place right now really sucks. A lot of abuse still goes, undetected, unfortunately. But we're pretty good at, not getting children involved in these abusive situations in the first place, if we can help it.
Home. And if they disagree with transgenderism, then their home is disregarding the safety and...
So, why is this guy jumping from two people are getting divorced and the court is trying to decide who gets custody to two people want to adopt? And the law says nothing about couples adopting. Notice here how he is carrying this away from what the actual text of this new law, it's not even a law yet, it's a Senate bill, it's proposed, it's not even a law, is saying.
And well-being of any child who steps foot into it. And therefore, they shouldn't be allowed to adopt. Do you see what I'm getting at here? This is what the enemy does. According to Jesus, the devil was a liar from the beginning and the father of lies.
What lie is being told here? Where is there a lie?
John 8:44. He's a thief who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. John 10:10. And the Democrats in the state of California have evidently aligned with his demonic mission fully. They will not stop with just this law.
How do you know that? Well, the other thing is, you don't have to live in California. I'm saying that sarcastically because that's a very common right-wing sort of talking point of, well, if you don't like that state's laws, move into a different state. No. It's not feasible for a lot of people, okay? When I moved to Colorado, it was, like $1,800 plus when all was said and done. Well, it was more than that because, what you don't understand is, let's just assume you're renting. First, you have to find a place to rent. I have a little bit of a difficult situation because I have to find pet-friendly rentals, and those aren't the easiest to come by, especially when your pets aren't dogs and cats. I mean, I have a dog, but that's a different story. There was a place I applied to live in, I checked out to live in Colorado. For some reason, caged pets were a problem, but pets that weren't living in cages weren't problems. I don't know how that makes any sense, whatever. So I have to find pet-friendly rentals, okay? I got a whole menagerie of, my roaches, I've got my tarantulas, my scorpions, my frogs, and, the axolotls and the geckos. They come with me, and then all my plants. Fun fact, I am actually the reason that one place in Rhode Island only allows people 2 plants in the household. Because I had, 180, mostly orchids, and it just pissed everybody off because they were on every windshield and there were shelves, and it's like, well, there was nothing in the lease agreement saying no plants, so they had to put a provision in there because of me. But anyway, what were we getting at here?
This pernicious worldview.
Oh yeah. So, you find a place to rent, you put down a security deposit and first month's rent, then you have to pay for U-Haul, which is, for that distance, it was $1,100. But then there are gas and lodging and, everything else. So it's thousands of dollars to move.
You will not rest until all Christian influence in society is wiped out.
No, that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is people are saying, you can have your beliefs and you can do your thing, but you can't push those beliefs on everybody. You can't make everybody in society live by your rules. And that's what these people want. They want us to all, even if we don't believe in Jesus, they want us to all live as though we believe in Jesus.
At least on the things that really matter. But this isn't the only law that they're hoping to pass at the expense of Christian values. The other law is perhaps even more shocking. This one is entitled SB 729, and it has to do with health care coverage in the state of California. The law says, quote, a policy of disability insurance that covers hospital, medical, and surgical expenses shall provide coverage for the diagnosis and treatment of infertility and fertility services.
Okay. So, if you personally have a religious objection to fertility treatments, you don't have to, and I think that this is, a dig at, surrogacy, lesbian couples trying to artificially impregnate, yada yada. Whatever it is. Now here's the thing. Private health insurance, which you are within your rights to get. So here's, okay. You start working for a company, right? You're not necessarily required to take their health insurance. If you have your own health insurance, you can submit a waiver wherein you say, hey, I don't need this company's health insurance because I have my own. Great. I've done it a couple of times. I've done it before when I was younger and still on my parents' health insurance, before I turned 26. And so you don't have to take your employer's health insurance. But this is a matter of whether public health insurance, that, remember, public health insurance covers people, Christian, non-Christian, whatever. If you as a Christian want to personally have a health insurance policy where it's privately owned and it only covers certain things, and so your religious beliefs aren't interfered with by you having this policy, you're completely free to. Nobody is forcing you to take your this public health insurance provided by your employers. Now, just personally, I don't think we should be treating it fertility. I don't think the world population has a fertility problem, but politically, I still think people do have the right to make their own decisions, and if they really want to have biological children for whatever reason, they should at least be, aided in doing so. And that includes fertility treatments. It's a personal choice that somebody should be allowed to make. Now, again, you don't have to A, hold this health insurance policy if you don't want it, or B, partake in fertility treatments. It's that easy.
End quote. So what does all that legal mumbo-jumbo actually mean practically? Well, among other things, it covers the cost of fertility treatments for people who aren't capable of having children.
Yes. Again, I think because of our population situation right now, people should not be having children. I think that we should be slowing that reproductive rate way down, really putting our foot on the brake, not the gas. It's my personal opinion, though. And my personal opinion does not belong in the fucking law.
But Colin, I don't see what's so bad about that. Correct. On the face of this, there seems to be no obvious issue for most people. The problem is that the law does not just cover fertility treatments for infertile heterosexual couples.
There it is.
A man and a woman, as you would expect. No, it also covers the fertility treatments of homosexual couples.
Well, isn't your whole objection to homosexuality the fact that it doesn't produce a baby? Like, wouldn't this just circumvent that whole issue altogether?
Now, surely it doesn't take a rocket scientist to explain why that's insane, but let me give it a shot. Since most people can't process basic definitions in modern society, let me clear some things up. A heterosexual couple, a man and a woman, is the only kind of couple that is capable of producing a child ever.
Not anymore. I follow people on Instagram. I follow a lesbian couple on Instagram who do IVF. Now, I don't know who in this economy is paying for IVF. It's ridiculously expensive. But if that's what they want to do, whatever. That's their choice. It's their life. I'm just going to live my life and do my thing. They can do their thing. Whatever. But the thing you're forgetting is that we have made it so people who are not heterosexual are capable of making babies. Scary, right?
There are 0 exceptions to this rule. The Lord made them male and female, Genesis 1:27. But
I mean, it doesn't say he made only male and female, technically.
by contrast, a homosexual couple is never able to produce a child between themselves.
And this is a bad thing. How?
Ever. And there are 0 exceptions for this rule as well.
Okay, but here's the thing. Didn't Mary get pregnant without a man? Like, can't things beyond heterosexual intercourse cause babies in your worldview?
So when someone needs fertility treatments, it's because they are infertile by comparison to other people in a comparable position.
Yes, and so being gay would render you infertile by proxy, okay?
That's why, for example, we don't give fertility treatments to chairs, because chairs aren't infertile, they just weren't designed to have babies. And in the exact same way, a homosexual couple is not infertile, they're simply not biologically designed to bear children.
Now, here's the other thing. This is gonna be really pedantic, but that's my whole jam. You can be gay and unable to produce children, okay? Now, I'm not fully gay, but I'm incapable of producing children. Okay? Being infertile is not confined to straight people. Remember that. I'm infertile. For other reasons. It's not something I'm going to get into here, but there are a lot of people who are infertile regardless of their sexual orientation.
Ever. So to imply that a homosexual couple is somehow in the same category as an infertile heterosexual couple is so incredibly asinine and frankly offensive.
Well, I mean, fertility treatments doesn't always mean, I mean, you saw the definition. Let's go back to it for a sec. Let's just see. The failure to establish a pregnancy or to carry a pregnancy to live birth after regular, unprotected sexual intercourse. Gay people can have regular, unprotected sexual intercourse, and that can fail to establish a pregnancy. So technically, infertility means condition or status characterized by any of the following. So it's weird. He's not thorough here. He doesn't go through all of these definitions of infertility. If he did, he'd be talking about this first. Now, infertility means condition or status characterized by a licensed physician's findings based on their medical, sexual, and reproductive history, age, physical findings, yada yada. Their inability to reproduce as an individual or with their partner without medical intervention. Okay, well, first of all, as an individual, I mean, like, I guess if you go to a sperm bank or have your neighbor, give you a cup with a turkey-based, whatever. The failure to establish pregnancy after regular unprotected sexual intercourse. Guess who's having a lot of regular unprotected sexual intercourse? Not you. Alright, let's go back. Is that a froggy?
The mind. The logic here is non-existent. It's like saying that a bullfrog is this.
Is that a bullfrog? I believe that is a bullfrog.
same thing as a Boeing 737 airplane, because neither of them know how to tie their shoes. This would only make sense to a person if they've lost the ability to formulate a rational or ethical thought. And guys, this is what life looks like when you abandon God.
Okay, again, people can still believe in God without believing in this Christianity nonsense, but
Does the Bible not say that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? Proverbs 1:7. So it goes without saying that when you abandon God, you abandon the way of wisdom. And that is precisely what we're seeing here. But this gets even worse, because if you're a Christian in California and you pay your taxes, that means that your hard-earned money will be used to pay for gay couples to have kids.
I don't think that's exactly how it works, unless it's specifically government. So, government and public aren't the same thing, okay? Government-sponsored stuff is not going to be the same thing as something that's public, okay? There are public non-government entities. Now, if we were to be fair, I would say, okay, so let's have a provision in the tax code where people can apply to get that money back so that, the $4 a year that you pay in taxes that actually gets to somebody's government-sponsored health insurance is going to, do you know how ridiculous this would be? What if it's like, sometimes you just have to deal with things you don't agree with in order for us to all flourish. It would be like me saying, okay, you know what? Because I'm not obese, I think that none of my tax dollars should go towards healthcare for obese people because they increase their risk of needing the healthcare system, which drives up the prices for everybody and causes a lot of problems. But, they don't have to be obese in the first place. And that it is not necessarily a religious objection to something that's still happening. So we could get around it by saying, okay, tax dollars are going to be specifically allocated from people in order to fund things within our government that that person agrees with. And I would be fine with that. So I'd be fine if the tax code was rewritten so that, my tax contribution goes towards, funding gender-affirming care and this and that, and doesn't go towards, diabetic Dan down the road who just sits on his couch eating donuts all day, and when he loses a foot and my tax money goes towards, them cleaning the wound and him not dying, maybe my tax money doesn't actually go towards that when someone else's can. Yeah, that would be fine with me.
If you believe that a stable two-parent household with a mother and a father is ideal and biblical and the best way to raise children...
So, just because, here's the thing. We can get really nitty-gritty with what the best way to raise a child is, to the point where we decide that anybody who doesn't fall within a certain, percentile of child-rearing ability isn't allowed to have kids. And that would be a fucking dystopian nightmare. Do we really want to do that?
Just know that the state of California not only completely disagrees with you, but they have no problem using your money to accomplish that end. And let's run some numbers to see how much this is going to cost Christians in California. Here are some of the most popular fertility treatments and their costs. IVF, or in vitro fertilization, costs $15,000 to $20,000 per round of treatment. Egg harvesting and storage costs $7,000 to $10,000. And surrogacy, which is an option that male homosexual couples would have to pursue, costs a whopping $100,000 on average. This is what the state of California is using your tax money to accomplish, so that small, impressionable children can grow up in unnatural and sinful households that hate God and the values given in His Word.
Okay, just because a child is gay, trans, whatever, doesn't mean they're sinful and doesn't mean that they hate God.
These laws are absolutely an attack on Christian values.
No, they're not, and there are two reasons why. One, you can be a Christian without being a homophobe or a transphobe. And two, you can be a homophobe and a transphobe without being a Christian.
So here's my question to Christians. What exactly is it going to take for you to stand up and say enough is enough? Does the government actually have to come into your house and threaten to take your kids away for you to finally see what's happening here? You see, while most American Christians are sipping lattes at their local seeker-sensitive church, listening to a pastor in skinny jeans tell them how to follow their dreams or something like that, the woke LGBT movement has been changing society at a fundamental and legislative level. And
Oh, give me a break. That's not how this is happening. We are having people starting to recognize the value of human life and the importance of people just being, themselves. And, honestly, it just seems a little weird that there's such an emphasis on, something that doesn't harm anybody else.
while most Christians are arguing against videos just like this one because my tone is too mean and hurtful, the LGBT movement has been taking action against Christian values.
I have a question. How many of the lawmakers in California who are coming up with these laws are LGBT? Let's just check this out. Alright, only 10% are, in the LGBTQ community of, California. Newsflash, that's not enough for a fucking majority. Okay, let's go back.
And make no mistake about it, these are just the first of many laws that they will try to pass. So if you attend a church that refuses to speak clearly on these social issues, I recommend finding another one. If your pastor is more afraid of offending the seekers at his church than he is passionate about speaking the truth, I recommend finding a new pastor. Read the harsh words of Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 when he calls false teachers servants of Satan. Read the harsh words of Jesus in Matthew 23 when he calls the Pharisees sons of hell. These were strong men who risked offending people in the pursuit of speaking truth in love.
So remember that any system that's trying to keep you adhering to it is going to say these things about people who don't do exactly what they want. That is just normal human behavior. It doesn't mean anything supernatural.
As they knew they had to. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that Christians should become mean-spirited and jaded and angry. I'm suggesting that we become biblical. Let's stand up for the truth of God's word and bring it to bear in our lives and in the lives of those around us. Don't bow for a second to the spirit of the age. Don't surrender for a moment to the LGBT mob. Stand up for the truth of God's word. I pray this has been a blessing to you. And please know this video is not meant as a sinful attack, but rather as a biblical critique.
Wow. I did not expect to be spending that much time. I mean, we kind of breezed through the first, 3 minutes of that video really quickly, and then it just took a turn, and I had to lay out some things. But I hope you all enjoyed that. This is just some of the language that these people are using. You know it's deliberately manipulative, but, it's just getting to a whole other level. So, be pedantic, romantic, and away from the Atlantic, and I will see y'all in the next one.